Well, we always appreciate the time we get with Steve Phillips, especially this time of year, to evaluate the free agent and trade market, ask him some specific questions about what it's like to run a team this time of year. Steve, good morning. Thanks again for being with us.
Morning, guys.
And let's hit you on these phone calls that are being placed to Rogers Center with interested parties thinking that maybe Vlad Guerrero or Bo Bichette could be had. Is that a realistic thing this winter?
You know, it's interesting, right? There were reports that the Cubs had interest in Bo Bichette to play third base. And, Ross Atkins came out and said, listen, we get a lot of phone calls on our guys. We understand why people like them. They're really good players, but Bo Bichette is going to be our shortstop of the future. Now, for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I think the phone calls coming in on him are in part where he underperformed last year, really the last 2 years from where he was a couple years ago. And teams are thinking to themselves, maybe we like him more than they like him. Maybe there's some frustration that he's not performed. Maybe they're giving up on him. And so you always try to see where the other team is to take their pulse. But I'd be shocked. I think the only way that either one of these two guys get traded, and I don't think it would be now, is if they get Shohei Ohtani, because I don't think they can afford Ohtani, Bichette, and Guerrero. So I think that if they got Ohtani, they'd have to then make some decisions. I don't think it'd be this offseason. Neither Bichette or Guerrero are breaking the bank, but I think at some point they can't afford all three. But right now, I think this team's being built around those two, and it'd be a significant pivot if they move off of either one of those guys right now.
I would agree. It is fun to speculate about the big names, however, and there is a big name that I guess it's common speculation now over his being traded, and that's Juan Soto. So asking you this question, what kind of package would it take to get Juan Soto on your roster?
Right. So we know what they gave up. 5 blue chip prospects going to the Washington Nationals. They wouldn't get that in return for a 1-year rental. I think the real challenge they're going to find is matching up with somebody, because if they're going to trade Juan Soto, they want to get major league ready talent in return because they still want to compete. They've got a roster of guys. This isn't a rebuild. They've got a roster of guys they're locked up to for the long term. They're built to win now. So they're going to need some pitching in the back end of the rotation, and they're going to need to replace Soto in the outfield. Ideally, they probably wouldn't mind getting a center fielder in the mix there. The challenge is going to be finding those teams that have the talent that match up with what they would prefer to get. Now, you could say, well, we'll just get the best available talent, but they want their roster at the big league level to improve or at least be rounded out in this trade. And so I start looking around at teams that are out there, and the teams that have deep farm systems that might have players that fit the Padres can't really take Soto. Either, they don't have a spot for him in their outfield, or they don't have the payroll flexibility to do it. The Rays aren't making a deal to do it. They don't have the pitching to give up. The Cardinals are an intriguing team to me. Now with the added pitchers, the 3 free agents, Matthew Liberatore, Zach Thompson, are pitchers that could be moved in a trade. Then they've got the depth of outfielders that could trade and replace Soto in the deal going there. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a Cardinals-type move. The Yankees are in, but the Yankees' depth is more in the infield. That's not what they need in San Diego. They're loaded with infielders, and I don't know if the Yankees have the pitching that would satisfy San Diego. So finding the right fit is going to be, I think, the bigger challenge than moving Soto himself.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let me call your attention to a tweet that just came in. I think we just saw a flash of it a moment ago. I guess the Yankees and Padres have been in discussions, and this is per Andy Martino. Yanks and Padres talk about a Soto trade have progressed to the point of exchanging names on players. San Diego's initial ask was very high, and the teams are not close to an agreement. I would imagine one, if not both, of the Oswalds or Oswaldos would be in this package going to San Diego. More major league talent than not is my guess, and that's a pretty interesting tweet we just learned of, and we'll be following that in Nashville.
Yeah. Matt, I got to tell you, I don't trade Soto to the Yankees unless I'm getting Jason Dominguez back in the deal.
Ooh.
I mean, sure, the infielders are fine, but Jason Dominguez has got to come back. I know he had Tommy John surgery, but position players come back from that just fine. Jason Dominguez has got to be in the deal if I'm the Padres, or there's a non-starter with the Yankees, at least this early. I'm not talking to you, A.J. Preller to Brian Cashman, unless you're putting Dominguez in the deal.
Oh, this is
Cashman
sexy.
will say no.
So that's
who
you
I want.
That's you as A.J. Preller. What if you're the team trading for Juan Soto? What are you willing to give up, knowing that it's either a 1-year rental or you have to sign him to that deal? Are you willing to part with Jason Dominguez if you're Brian Cashman?
Right. So I did deals like this, but times have changed. I traded prospects for Mike Piazza in May of his walk year before free agency. I gave up prospects to get Al Leiter with 1 year left to be able to do it because I wanted to win now. And my belief was I could then sign those players, keep them, and it would justify my giving up the prospects to do it. It's a risky proposition, but if you sign them, then you can say, I don't care what the guys I gave up become, because Jason Dominguez may be great. He's not going to be Juan Soto. He's going to be great. So I would give Dominguez in the deal, take my chances, and if I'm the Yankees, I can sign Soto. If it takes the biggest contract, I will give him the biggest contract. And so I would be into that level, even if it took Dominguez. I would prefer to keep him out. So I think that each team's a little bit different about where they are in time and place in their organization, how desperate they are to win. They need to win the offseason in New York this year for the Yankees, and then they need to win in season next year to get that sort of pedigree and perception back for the organization.
Gosh, I love this discussion. We're working on a full screen now of players to go from San Diego to the Big Apple who have had various degrees of success, starting with Eddie Lee Whitson, who hated pitching in the Bronx, Chase Headley, who went over there and was okay for a little while. This is going to be fun to watch. Let me get you to another topic, though, Steve. From the trade market to the free agent market and the international free agent market specifically, let's talk about the Giants, who have famously swung and missed at some high-ticket items over the past couple of years. Would they be in on both Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto? Is there enough canvas there for both of those guys?
Yeah, it's interesting. So what we're hearing is the Giants are all in on free agents, but they're not all in on both Ohtani and Yamamoto. And I think it makes sense to a certain degree and it means to me that Shohei Ohtani must be the priority and then Yamamoto, because, if you're going to get Ohtani, he's going to just hit this year. And then he'll pitch a year later. So they're going to figure out how to put a pitching staff together beyond that, but they're getting a guy who will be part of the rotation. In Yamamoto, they can go get a guy who's a starter, but he's not going to affect their offense, and it's going to be much more difficult to find an offensive player like Ohtani than it is for, I think, the Giants to find a pitcher that can be serviceable to get them through the year. But I don't think both fit there, and that would be a lot of money to be able to put out there for both those players. But I do think they're going to go all in to try to get one of the two. They went all in on Judge last year. They would have gone further than the Yankees, but Judge decided I just wanted to be a Yankee. They went in all on Correa. They lost out because of the physical. They need a star. Not since Bonds did they have that marquee player, and they've lost some of that attention, some of that leisure dollar in San Francisco. They need to get back. Ohtani would certainly be a start to doing that.
Let's bring this all together with a two-part question here. Based on your background and your knowledge as a guy who ran the Mets for many years, was there ever a gentleman's agreement that you would not swim in the same free agent waters as the Yankees? And so the next part of that question is, if it came down to the Mets and or the Yankees on the Yamamoto sweepstakes, who wins?
Yeah, I got to tell you that there was never a conversation had between ownership groups, but there seemed to be an understanding that it didn't behoove either side to go after another team's player who becomes a free agent or to go after the same free agent, because it turns into a loss for both teams. One, the team that wins overpays for the player, and the team that loses gets mud in their face. And so they've always avoided that. And, there seemed to be this understanding about who was where. Nobody ever had like Brian Cashman and I never had a conversation about it, would never even talk about it. But we never competed against guys. I made a trade with them, but it's never happened where they've gone all in after a premium blue chip top flight free agent. Yamamoto's the guy. And I got to tell you, the script has flipped in New York. George Steinbrenner never would have lost in a head-to-head with the Mets back then. There was always going to be one more dollar with George Steinbrenner's face on it than there was Nelson Doubleday and Fred Wilpons. I think there's one more Steve Cohen dollar out there than there is Hal Steinbrenner. This could be really interesting and start an arms race in New York.
Such provocative stuff. Great insight from Steve Phillips, as always, and so much to kick around prior to the winter meetings. Looking forward to seeing you in Nashville coming up in just a few short days.
Thanks, guys.